afternoon, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, we're back. We're live with another Kev Baker show right here on TFRlive.com. And I am coming to you, you know what comes next, from the heartland of Scotland, and more precisely, the smart land of Glasgow. We go all the way down to Australia for listeners down there. Big shout out to, I'll pick Donnie today. Then we go all the way back up to Alaska, over to Norway and Sid and his mum, and back to Nebraska. And we do that thanks to the technology, the brilliance, the wonder that Chris and Cherie Geo have put together here at Truth Frequency Radio, TFRlive.com. And remember, you can catch Chris and Cherie on Beyond the Veil. They've got their YouTube channel. You can usually catch them going live over there. Check that out. And tonight I am joined by a very special guest indeed. A very good friend. It's not one Kevin, but it's two Kevins for the price of none today. Yes, that's right. We're going to talk about signs in the heavens. We're going to get Kevin's thoughts on some of the guests I've had on in recent times. We're going to make sense of all the madness that's going on out there in the universe, as my good friend NeSe calls it. And then there'll probably be a whole lot more on top of just that. So without any further ado, let's get him in here. Kev, how you doing, man?
Hello, 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 and high on life. I will be any opportunity to be with thee. So thank you, my brother from the same Mother Earth. From our birth, may we show our worth and share, because we care, information that'll bring you a little bit more thinking and hopefully a couple giggles on the way. Thank you for the opportunity, my friend.
Okay, we do have some good fun when we get together for these shows recently, and we always have, but I think we also at the same time as having good fun, I think we put out really good information, and the stuff that you bring to the table kind of inspires me to think about things differently, look at things that sometimes I don't really take much time to look at. It's always good to get another perspective, and it's double special for somebody like you because the audience get to hear somebody that has done years of research, but not only that, I mean, your connection, the fact that you are, you know, from the Paleo-American tribe of the Anishinaabe and everything that comes with that, and the knowledge and the wisdom that is contained within that particular kind of walk of life. I think that's what really adds to the shows that we do put together. And I think you've probably noticed, and it's not been too deliberate on my part, but things have synchronistically been coming together. We've done the shows from Down Under that I know you've been really, really blown away by. We're going to be putting together a special with you and Luna and Donnie. I think Malaya's going to come on as well. And we've had Mary DeCina. She's turned up just when we need her as well. And I say just when we need her because we seem to be going down this cosmic, metaphysical, spiritual, interconnected rabbit trail or rabbit hole, depending what your own perspective is. And I think, Kev, at this time, as we approach this great conjunction, as they call it, and what I suspect is more close to the Mayan calendar change date, the change of one age into another, I think this is a significant time that we're going through right now. And it's playing out in the heavens above us as well. And I think all of that comes together, Kev, and I don't think it's any coincidence. We don't do coinky-dinkies. That we're covering these topics and we're building these bonds and forming these relationships and putting this information out right now. Right when I think it needs to be put out there. We're on the cusp of such technological change that will elevate us into something like the Jetsons. But at the same time, I think it's even more imperative then to hold on to and carry the wisdom, the knowledge from Indigenous peoples from around the world into this next age. We can't stop the changing of the age. I think we're doing our part to help carry over the stories, Kevin. into that next stage. Does that make sense? I tell you what, for somebody that just goes off the hip and doesn't script anything, that almost made sense to me.
I would say it made more sense than dollars, but I think that's much more worthy, because if corporations would quit worrying about making dollars, then they might make more sense also. But the beauty of this opportunity to be together through the the inevitable change that is going to occur every moment, every nanosecond, because if we solidify the illusion of time, then we get caught within that prison of the tick-tock, tick-tock, because that clock doesn't ever stop. And if you look at that face of a clock, you'll see that it's a circle trapped within a square. And then if you see that symbolism in that iconography, and you think of the old albums, it was a circle within a square. And if you think of buying a CD, it was a circle within a square. And then if you look at the circle, and when you square the circle, then you make a square inside the circle. And if we are at 12 on the circle, like a clock, and we're looking at 3, if we follow the curve, if we follow around the bend, then we don't know what's coming ahead. But if we flatten the curve and we go directly from 12 to 3, we have a better course of action. And this is where the powers that should not be would rather flatten the curve and make this direct line of course, and then hit us with a right turn where it shatters our paradigm or it breaks our dogma, and then we find ourselves going around and around again, but we're following the square within the natural curve of Mother Earth, because Mother Earth doesn't create straight lines. It's man that we manipulate what they can, whether it's using technology to mimic Mother Nature or to create that prison of the tick-tock to keep us trapped within it, because they want that gears to keep grinding as they continue to push us, to hurt us, to drive us, to manipulate us to their agenda. But at what opportunity will we break that dogma, break that paradigm? Because there's way more of us than there are the powers that should not be. But how can we find that collective consciousness to be the action of that change?
You know, I'm just listening to you there, Kevin, and I'm looking at a diagram of a circle, and it's squared, and then it's got another square on top of that that's shifted 45 degrees around it, and it actually shows you how that enables you to go from 12 o'clock to 3 o'clock in a straight line, and that in itself makes another box within the circle and the box. And just looking at it, you know, this circles and cycles, and I'll ask you, I mean, for me, I think it makes sense, but you look back over history, be it short term or real long term across the epochs, and you start to see how history and the cycles, they don't repeat exactly. I mean, it's not like you can exactly say things are the same, but they certainly rhyme. They have a familiarity to them. And is it because we're always going round in these circles, Kevin? Chasing our
Well,
tails round and round we go, and at no point do we step off at that circular
was
treadmill.
like you were saying earlier about the perspective of observing it. So if we think of that symbol of the snake eating its tail, if we look down upon it, it looks like the snake is eating its tail. But if we turn it on its side, we would realize that it's just the snake following the circle or the cycle and growing like a spring, because the cycles are always there. whether you want to call that cycle a second or a minute or an hour or a day or a year or an epoch or the precession of time from one zodiac to the next zodiac. And this is where we find ourselves now. The cycle of this moment is we're about to find ourselves in the winter solstice of the northern hemisphere. If you calculate from wherever you are and you look up the sunrise and then you look up the sunset, you will see that there's a length of period of day where we're almost at 8 hours of daylight. So usually what happens, and there's always an exception to the rule, there's always an anomaly to the theory. So usually around 8 hours, the sun will start coming back towards the northern hemisphere because it's going now down to the Tropic of Capricorn, which is really exciting because with Luna talking about her native or her paleo Australians and the Native Americans, where we're going to find ourselves at this winter solstice to discuss these things of the cycles. So if we follow these cycles, if we synchronize with these cycles, from my experience, I am able to fine tune into a reality that is beyond the man-made reality of the illusion of time. And so by using that discernment, by changing that perspective, then I can make discernment of where I find myself in that cycle. The greatest gift I believe that we have as humans is pattern recognition. And we will look for, even like when we look at something, our eyes will try to find a pattern in what we're looking at. So when we recognize this pattern of one new moon to the next new moon, and if it's over that greater period of the 72 days where it may be the spring to the summer solstice or the summer solstice to the winter equinox and the equinox to the winter solstice, those are periods like Mary was talking about where we can take assessment of what has changed, how have I changed. And if we're truly honest with ourselves during that discernment, we can say, hey, I've had way too much sugar this past 3 months. So for the next 3 months, I'm going to lay off the sugar, or I'm going to lay off the coffee, or I'm going to lay off the, fill in the blank. Whatever you discern that is causing universe negativity, I would strongly suggest that you try to neutralize it or at least transmute it into positivity, because we have that ability. We have the ability to be the choice of action and change our immediate cycles. Because do you want to be caught up in your cycle, or do you want to be caught up in the cycles of the psychos?
Kevin. You don't know how much that links into shows that are going to be coming up here on the network with Neil Sanders. We're going to be taking a look at just the information that people are into right now, the narratives, the stances that people are taking on various things. And it's very interesting how you kind of put that there, about the psychos, because a lot of the time, ladies and gents, and I hate to tell you this, but a lot of the things that you think you stand for, and a lot of the storylines out there, and a lot of the things that appear to go against authority and appear to go against governments, it's quite startling when you then trace back where these things, the money's coming from. and who it is that's benefiting from these counter opinions, these counter positions. And I think that's going to really, really tie in well with what Kevin was talking about there, because I think we are caught up in the cycle of the psychos more than we know it. More than we know it. This informational war that we're in, it is so deep, it's so disturbing, and we're all involved. And it's all part of this cycle that we're going through right now with the psychos and how they manipulate us, and Kev would say manipulate us with all of our data, and where they know us better than we know ourselves. And that comes again from patterns, like Kevin was talking about, pattern recognition. And Kevin, you said that pattern recognition is one of the greatest gifts that's bestowed upon us, and I do agree with you. Only I think at times it can also be one of our worst curses as well, because we have a tendency to look for and sometimes find patterns that may not even be there, but because our brains love patterns so much and it loves to have something familiar to lie back on and go to, then that's how sometimes I totally agree with you. It's a blessing, it's amazing, because that's what leads us down these rabbit holes, and that's what lets us put things together, and it's why we're here where we are today. But at the same time, can you see how it could also be a curse as well for some, Kevin? If that
Well,
discernment isn't in tune with what they're doing.
unfortunately, I'm not able to see that, but metaphorically,
You know what I mean?
I'm so I know. I just had to go there.
I
Forgive me.
know. You had to
Any
at one point.
opportunity,
You just love, you love it. You do. That's okay.
but this is where I've stated many, many times about my Holy Trinity. And I love Richard Gregory, where he said, "My truth does not have to be validated by anyone's ignorance." And that's good in one sense, but my Holy Trinity of positive, neutral, and negative can be placed upon everything. So, like we're talking pattern recognition. Pattern recognition can be positive, it can be neutral, and it can be negative.
Hey,
And
well
this
done. I
is
like it. I
this
like
is
it.
where we have to be so honest with ourselves, and that's the hardest challenge we have, is to be honest with ourselves. And even more of a challenge is where our closest circle of friends can be positive, neutral, and negative. And when they're negative is when they're so fearful of losing our friendship that they're not willing to be honest. You know, where it's like, yeah, maybe you shouldn't wear that outfit. It's not that flattering. Or where it's like, hey, why don't you come drinking with me tonight? Even though I know you shouldn't be drinking, come drinking with me tonight, because then I don't feel so bad about my drinking compared to how you don't drink. You know, so how do we take that discernment and say, hey, is this positive for me? Is this neutral for me? Or is this negative? And how do I find that strength within love, positivity, without fear, negativity, to change that behavior, to change that pattern?
Maggie, okay. I hear you, man. Yep, yep. Just looking at the time there as well, dude. But I like how you said that. The positive, the negative, and the neutral. And it does. It kind of fits all things, really. You can really put everything into that holy trinity of yours, can't you?
Well, and I have been proclaiming that I'm working on a book, and it's called Spherical Enlightenment.
Oh, dude, I like that.
And the subtitle is called The Quest or the Path to the Seventh Direction. As I've shared before, that there's 7 major directions. You have, if you're going by the compass, you got north, south, east, and west. And then you have up and down, the cardinal 6. But then you have the 7th direction, which is the point where they all meet. And that 7th direction is within your center. And more times than not, we are so fearful to look within our own darkness and make that assessment of where is it, positive, neutral, or negative.
So what did you make of Mary the other night when she was saying, go and take it to the mirror? Go and ask yourself in the mirror. Would you agree that that's a thing? That's almost like the same what you're saying here, right?
100%. 100%. There's no one. Well, okay, I take that back. That's a definitive statement. More likely, you are the ultimate judge, juror, and executioner in your world. There is nobody that is going to beat you up inside like yourself. But along with the negativity, you have to take in the positivity and the neutrality that you are. You are a combination of all three. But at any precious moment, you can make the proclamation and the course of action to say, no more am I going to consume sugar like I do, or coffee like I do, or alcohol, or whatever you find to be negative and disrupting, you being the most positive you that you could be, but to look within, that's the challenge. As a Native American, we have these things where we call them fasting, and I'm about to start, I haven't decided yet if I'm starting my winter solstice fast on this Friday or Sunday, because I'm still trying to calculate when the winter solstice is going to occur. And so during these times of fasting, we would sit there and reflect over our world. And more times than not, people would go and call them vision quest, where sometimes they would be put up on a mountain, put up on a hill. My ancestors, they used to build nests up in the trees, and they would sit in these trees for 4 days with no food, no water, and they would sit there and reflect on themselves. So could you imagine how much contemplation an individual could go through taking 4 days to contemplate their own existence? I think by that ending period of those 4 days, you would have a pretty clear view, metaphorically, of what you should do for your future.
Very, very well said. And I like how you called it the vision quest. And I was thinking there, Kevin, you think of the times that we live in now, folks, and many of you out there may have a child, maybe a teenager, more appropriately speaking here, and then think to yourself of going and saying to that teenager, right, vision quest time, going building a nest up in a tree, taking their mobile device off them, no food, no water for 4 days. I tell you, they would probably try and get you arrested by the police for like suggesting even doing something like that. It just shows you the contrast between where we came from and where we are now. And I wonder, how much time is spent looking inwards, but by people and just everyday people. I know myself it's one of the hardest places to look. Why? Because often you don't like what you find in there. And Kevin's right. There's good. There's your bad parts. Nobody's perfect. And then there's the in-between, right? Imagine that. 4 days up there to contemplate, to think about everything. You see, Kev, that's the kind of thing I'm talking about that we can't lose touch of. We can't lose that connection. But we are losing it rapidly, right? As much as I love the technology, and I do love it, but we're losing a lot of this stuff that you're talking about here. And what does that mean for us long term? Now, we'll be getting into more of this on the other side with Kevin. I'll be asking him about the Great Conjunction. We'll be talking more about the moon and a whole lot more right here on today's very, very deep Kev Baker show. Kevin squaring the circle. Yes, we are. The two of us. Not one, but two for the price of none. We'll be right back. Don't go anywhere. You crazy KBS savages. Yes, indeed. We're back. We're live on what is really developing into a very special Kev Baker show indeed. I've got NeSe here, aka Kevin Shores. Yes, indeed. That's why today it's Kevin squared. You get not one but two Kevins and a Dave for the price of not one, not two, but none. Yeah, there you go. We're talking about the cycles of the psychos, and then of course during the break, conversation kept on going. We were having a laugh. And then we got talking about Norway. And before we get back into anything, Kevin, I would really love for you to share with the audience what we were just talking about there. Because you were talking about our good friend Sid. And of course, our big shout out to Norway in the intro. Big shout out to Sid's mum as well. Even if she's not listening, tell her I said hello. We were talking about Norway during the break, and I was asking you, did you think that the Vikings hold a piece of this jigsaw that we're putting back together? And what I mean is, have they got information that connects to and gives value to all the stuff that we're trying to bring back to people's attention in these times today? And you mentioned you had talked to Sid. You want to share with the audience what you and Sid kind of got into?
Well, we were discussing the fact that my ancestors that were on the East Coast, all the way from the East Coast to Minnesota, that they allowed the Vikings to have settlements minusculely on the eastern coast to where they could stop and get supplies. But the parameters that they gave them was, this is just a supply spot. Don't think you're going to anchor yourself in or we're going to have challenges. And there's been a couple stories about where we had to, lack of a better term, strongly suggest to them that they move on, or they might be missing or losing some more people than they lost.
You see, Kev, this is why it was different when they turned up in England as well. When they turned up on the shores of North America, they probably took a look at their potential enemy and thought, nah, not for us, but they look like they can handle themselves. And this rapport, this relationship was built. Similar, I think, when they came to Scotland as well. They looked at the Picts and thought, wow, you guys look just like us and just as crazy, just as big and just as mad, and you drink as much, and we're cool with you. But then you look at what happened when they arrived in Northern England. You see, folks, there's a lesson to be learned here. When men start prancing around wearing tights and fancy coloured like costumes and really flamboyant type dresses and things back in the day, playing flute music and all that kind of jazz, the Vikings took one look at that and thought, we ain't having any of that. We'll quite happily take over this piece of land. You see what happens, folks, when you get too woke? All these young men today wearing their mankles out and things like that. If the Vikings turned up and seen that, it'd be the end of us. But yes, Kevin, sorry, I thought I'd interject with a little piece of slight humour there. Slight humour along the way.
But we are quite civilized with our decadence.
Yes, we play flute music and we all prance around in tights and funny shoes, and I tell you, dude, that was the downfall of it. But anyway,
But
I
my
like where
ancestors also played flute, but
but
back
there's a way of playing
300
flute.
years ago,
And you think of the
they were
bagpipes,
7
right?
feet.
The bagpipes is just a flute with a bag of air attached to it. So I mean, there's ways of playing flutes that won't get you in trouble with the Vikings. There you go.
Well, and if you personally know of any bagpipers, I'd like to know, because my mother, for whatever reason, loves the bagpipes.
I think it's the same as the didgeridoo. I think it's the same as your drum music. I think there's something that resonates in that music, bro. I mean, they used to say that when the Scots would go into battle, they would play the pipes. Even like the First World War and things, you'd have the piper playing, and it would like it's like a psychological warfare kind of weapon, because it
Oh,
would put fear into the enemy, you know.
absolutely. You think? I mean, I've witnessed where there's been, I think it was 10 bagpipers at one occasion that I got to witness, and the notes will permeate almost to your soul. And this is the same, like if you've ever had the experience of going to a powwow, when you get to these powwows, like our annual summer powwow around the solstice, when you get over 200 jingle dress women dancing, and you hear those jingles on their dress start hitting in synchronicity, you just hear this, and it just permeates right to your core. And then on top of it, you have our drum singers, where they're singing these songs that have been passed down for hundreds of years. It's so overpowering, and there's no moments that I feel more proud to be of Anishinaabe descent is than when I'm at these ceremonies and rituals, and you have these elders, pounding a drum and singing these songs, or these individuals that play flute, and they play these old songs that have been passed on, for years and years. It's just awe-inspiring.
Big time, brother. Big time. I'm gonna dig up some bagpipe music before we go away today. Definitely gonna get to hear the skirl of the bagpipes. Oh yeah, tell you, I'll be on full Braveheart mode. I'll be going full Mel Gibson. I know he's Australian, but he's an honorary Scotsman. But listen, you mentioned the Vikings, Northern America, the Anishinaabe. Can I throw a curveball to you that I know it's a curveball you're gonna like? When I watch Oak Island, Kevin, my belly tells me, my gut tells me that I'm not saying that they are the central part of the Oak Island story, but something tells me that at one point Vikings were very aware of what would have been a brilliant strategic landing place after coming across the North Atlantic. But what say you to maybe a Viking Oak Island connection?
Well, I think we discussed this at one time. I don't remember if we did it on one of the shows, but I believe, this is my speculation, that Oak Island at one point was a island that was used for rituals and ceremonies by my ancestors, but then the powers that should not be used it as a strategic stronghold, so they could figure out, how can we come to North America and take what they have? Because being that far away from the coast gives them an advantage to where they can see, if a bunch of canoes are coming their way, they could pretty much fortify it. Plus on top of that, military-wise, because of the whole use of flintlocks and cannons and stuff, and especially with germ warfare, they were able to wipe out my people. People don't talk about, my ancestors. We had a 500-year treaty with the Buon people, or what is called the Lakota, Dakota, Nakota people. And we also had treaties with the Iroquois Confederation. My people, the ancestors, the French called us Ojibwe, and the English called us Chippewa. But in our language, we're called Anishinaabe. And the reason why the French called us Ojibwe, because if you pushed us too far, one of the worst things that my people would do to you is they would take a bear hide and they would keep the fat on the bear hide and they would lean it towards a fire until that bear fat is melting and hot, and they would wrap you around with this bear hide, and it would make your skin pucker like it's roasted. So if you look at the etymology of the word Ojibwe, it means puckered like roasted. And the most heinous crime that an entity could do in the Anishinaabe standards is to harm innocents. And so if you were proven guilty of harming innocent, you would find yourself wrapped in a bear hide. And if you survived, it was like saying the creator said, okay, he survived or she survived. And if you died, it was the creator saying, okay, it is what it was, but there is always repercussions to our actions. I don't feel there should be as much repercussions for our words, because as a veteran, I swore an oath to defend this Constitution, and in that Constitution, we have this First Amendment right to say what we want. But because you have the right to say what you want, does that mean you have to say it, especially if you blatantly know what you're about to say is negativity?
I'm just listening to you, bro. I'm just listening to you. I know it sounds like I wasn't paying attention there, but I was.
But that's that is one of the challenges where we have these social networks and we have these standards of today where people are like, I have the right to say this, but they know what they say is going to be upsetting. Have you ever had that when a person goes, I don't mean to upset you by saying this,
but yeah, don't take offense. Anyone that says don't take offense, you're getting ready for a kick in the stones.
Right.
They're about to offend you.
Or they can say the most heinous thing to you, and then at the very end they'll be like, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. And it's like, well, and I understand because I've done open mic comedy, and the comedians, when we get together, we will sometimes say the most heinous, ridiculous things, but we don't believe it.
You see,
we're
that's
just trying
like Scotland
to get a laugh
as well. Yeah, that's like Scotland as well. When you're like close to somebody, a friend, some other people listening to conversations would probably be, they'd be like, honestly, they'd be kind of like grimacing, listening to some of the things we say to each other. But like you said there, it's just like part of the way we roll. I mean, that doesn't mean anything. We're not being like we're literally offensive when we're offending one another, but it's just how we kind of roll,
Yeah, I agree, and I actually stopped doing open mic about a year and a half ago because the political correctness was
killed comedy, hasn't it?
Oh, it's heartbreaking, because if we can't laugh at ourselves, if we can't laugh at the stereotypical acknowledgement, because we can all agree in a generalization of groups of people. And there's nothing wrong with words. How is it that we've been so conditioned that if a few syllables come through my vocal cords in a certain pattern, it is like the end of the world just occurred.
It's,
When
for me, the evidence of the ultimate mind control, Kevin. It really is. That we've now got to a point where, like you say, a comment made today, it could have been made in 1980 and nobody would have batted an eye. You say the same thing today and you've got people wanting to cancel you, there's people wanting to lynch you. So what's changed? And they've changed the way that we think, the words that we use. And that's why, think of the control going on when you're literally getting into people's heads to the point where they'll stop themselves from saying something, maybe, at times, because they do know that it would be deemed offensive nowadays. But that's really deep mind control right there, Kev, right? That's how you
well,
control 7 billion people with a few at the top.
Well, this is where I have been in the last week. I've been revisiting William Cooper, and he has a mind control, I think it's like a 8-part series where he breaks it down, the step-by-step methodology that the powers that should not be are utilizing for the manipulation. Because if you do look at the full title of MK Ultra, it means mind control and behavior modification. And the powers that should not be, they're in it for the long game. The long game. They don't go to work or they don't go to their gatherings saying, hey, gentlemen, what are we going to do today? They're like, what are we going to do 50 years from now, 100 years from now? How can we continue to get more control, more power, more money, so my great, great, great grandchildren don't have to lift a finger? They can live in the decadence that I live in. And if you are going to be part of their agenda, if you can help them write the script or play out the script, then they'll let you be part of the group. But unless you show your worthiness to the narrative, then they'll only let you so far in. And unfortunately, I don't think a lot of people realize by the time they get in so deep, they metaphorically became cannibalistic spiders, to where as they get closer and closer to the center, they're willing to throw each other to the other masses for the possibility to get deeper towards the center. And like a spider, that web will permeate every facet of our existence. And if you don't believe me, go and do some research on the counterintelligent program.
Kev, you mentioned the key part of any mind control there, that you're right, a lot of people, it's left off the end. And it's the mind control to what purpose? It's to change behavior. And that's why this show tonight, it's deep woo, and it connects to the shows that we've done with Mary, Malaya. We had Nano on last night as well, that I know you were really in love with that show, Kevin. Luna. But it's also projecting forward, because Kevin's touching on things that I'm going to be touching on again on the 10th of December. And I keep putting that date out there because this is going to be a show that you really need to hear. Because we're living in a time where we're all being bombarded with weapons. Informational weapons. Psychological weapons. And the reason for that is because they want to change our behavior. I'm just going to read a little paragraph here, Kev, right? And it's from the book that Neil Sanders wrote about Cambridge Analytica. And it ties right in with this behavioural change that you're talking about. Because it says in here, when I first became aware of Cambridge Analytica, my initial concern was its similarity to JTRIG. And JTRIG is a GCHQ internet manipulation program that seeds false information into the web in order to cause confusion, provide stories and narratives that prove to be red herrings and sow disinformation to the targeted audience. And the purpose of such a program is to interfere with terrorist networks, but it also has been used to try and manipulate voting patterns in certain scenarios. Now, officially, the weapon is to be used against enemies of the state. Cambridge Analytica proudly boasted that they were involved in similar operations. They described themselves as a PSYOP firm. PSYOPs are normally the proviso of the intelligence agencies and considered a tactic of war. PSYOPs is short for psychological warfare operations, and the first thing that occurred to me is to wonder why a psychological warfare operation would be allowed to be perpetrated against the civilian population of the UK. Cambridge Analytica boast of applying focused advertising and using the manipulation of information to alter the perceptions of their target audience. Their Orwellian slogan is this: data-driven behavior change. Data-driven behavior change. Essentially, this company gathers as much data about you as it can, usually via social media, and applies its own algorithms to highlight what you like, but more importantly, what makes you angry. So, this whole behavioral change that you mentioned, Kevin, it's the crux of everything. And that's why I tell people to be very wary what side you take in an argument right now, because most sides are controlled, when you trace it all back, by the same people. And if these people are controlling what appears to be the narratives that seem to fly in the face of authority, they go against what the government's telling you, then just what is the agenda here? Whose purpose are you serving by spreading some of the stories out there that they're encouraging people to circulate? Albeit from the shadows, albeit through middlemen and YouTubers and social media influencers out there. Just whose bidding are we doing? And hey, Kev, it's one of the oldest tricks in the book, right? You can control all sides, and then you got total control. It's brilliant how they do it.
Well, just to add to that, the new terminology now is called astroturfing, where a corporation will use back channels to create a non-profit organization to oppose the company. Because if the distraction is there, if a company like Dapple wanted to in North Dakota at the Standing Rock, when the oil company wanted to come in, and this is astroturfing, okay? So the oil company will create these non-profit organizations that will start yelling and screaming and saying, no oil, no oil. So then if they control both spectrums, both polarities of the narrative, then they know that they're going to have an outcome somewhere in the middle. Just like where we have the left side and the right side, the Democrats and the Republicans. If they keep us going back and forth from one spectrum to the other, the more likely outcome is going to be somewhere in the middle. And we don't realize that that's the fencing to the far left and the fencing to the far right. And we are a herd of bison that are being driven towards a cliff. And so how do we stop that stampede? We can't jump up in front of the whole herd and say, stop, but we can run with the bison and push to the left and push to the right. And at this moment, it doesn't matter which way we're pushing, because what we do know is what is ahead of us in this course of direction we're on is not positive for the populace. It is only positive. It is only positive for the elitist. And this goes back to the whole perspective of it. These elitists continue to condition their offspring to have and want the same power and control, and they will desensitize them to the point of where they're okay to accept what we, the commoners, the goyim, the sheeple, the product,
The bison.
the bison, are willing to do. Because in the end, if they run us off the herd of the cliff, then they can go and gather up all the meat. And are we literally or metaphorically being grounded up and added to McDonald's? Soylent
Damn,
Green?
you went dark there, dude. I enjoy my McDonald's. Don't do that to me. Don't do that to me, man. So anyone out there that's tucking into a Big Mac right now, I hope we didn't put you off that. I'm only joking. But listen, we're right on the break, and when we come back on the other side, we're going to get back into the deep woo. It's woo that is interlaced with the connections, the links into all the stuff that's going on in the world today. People operating behind the shadows, the ones that know or think they're in the know of how to make things work. And we're all being nudged. We're all in that herd of bison, like Kevin said there. Some of us think we're not in it and we're not being played with, but we are. We all are. If you're online, you can guarantee somebody out there is using your profile to, or has at least looked at your profile to see if you're one of these people that can be nudged just gently from one position to another. The kind of thing that could nudge you from, oh, I don't know, being undecided in an election to, you know, draining the swamp. All that good stuff. How did that change take place in the truth movement? Left-right paradigms all back into it. It's amazing, right? And it all links together. And we'll be back after the break with more on KBS Squared. There we go. We are back. We are live. You know, this man, Mr. NeSe, Kevin, the Anishinaabe, our connection to the past. Yes. When he gets talking during the breaks, it's fascinating. And it gets harder and harder for me to remember that I need to include the audience again. Because the conversation is always engrossing. I think it's been a brilliant addition to the week so far. You loved hearing Mary on Monday. Nano Girl was on last night. What do you make of those two shows, Kev, before we dive into... Are you ready for this, ladies and gentlemen? Oh, I love it. The Great Mutation, or as it's also known, the Great Conjunction in the skies that's going to be taking place on December 21st, not 2012. 2020. So first up, Mary and Nano. You enjoy that, NeSe?
Well, this was the biggest challenge of waking up this morning where I'm like, how am I going to top this? What am I going to do? Power to the womb. Power to the womb, men. Power to the matrix. Because first we get Mary, you know, just saying like it is. And then we get Nano sharing her brilliance, and I'd love to go down the rabbit hole with Nano at any time, because I think we could keep each other from being caught in those oubliettes. But I love the pylon sinking into the ground. That was interesting because it made me think of that movie, The Time Machine, of the top dwellers and the underworld dwellers, because who's to know when these great convergence occur? Is there going to be a cataclysmic event to where the powers that should not be are going to run to their deep underground military bases, and then we on top, like the 300, are going to have to fight for our right to party hardy.
To party, yes, man. I'm telling you, we think so alike, dude. So alike, right?
But this is the wonderful excitement of being alive. Like I was talking earlier about going around the bend, that excitement of going around the bend, of unknowing what's in front of us. You know, we all like to be afraid, but some of us like to be more fearful because it's that adrenaline rush. We get that adrenaline rush, and if you think of living back hundreds of years ago when we had mountain lions running around, or I really like to think that we humanoids were alive during the dinosaurs, because I can't think of anything more more of an adrenaline junkie than it's like, okay, we have to outrun these raptors, or we need to make a defense against the Tyrannosaurus Rex.
Yeah, stuff
But
got real. Stuff got real fast back in the day.
Right? But imagine the whole thing of like Dinotopia. If these entities, the reptilians were the advanced species at that epoch, at that ancient civilization, where they were humanoids like the Sleestaks, and they were working alongside with the dinosaurs, and they were working together in a symbiotic relationship.
I like the thought of that, dude. I do like the thought of that. Can't remember if it's Jimmy or Scott always brings up that footprint beside the dinosaur print.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think that is fascinating.
You see, like when you find out something like that, Kev. I remember when I first heard that. It was on Coast to Coast or somewhere. I think it was Klaus Donner, somebody like that. I've had Klaus Donner on the show years ago. That was a highlight. He talks about all these out of place kind of artifacts and maps, and I mean a footprint beside the dinosaur print. Why? I couldn't figure out for a while, like how the whole world managed to move on the next day after that had been discovered. I mean, in the end of the day, the whole world should be stopping and going, hang on a minute, hang on a minute, hang on a minute. What do you mean there's a human footprint? What do you mean there's a human footprint next to a dinosaur? There's something wrong there, right?
Right. And we start looking at that human footprint and the dinosaur footprints, and then all of a sudden Pavlov's dog, the bell gets rung, and we're like, whoa, what? Okay, it's meal time. It's that NFL time. It's that latest episode. It's that distraction. They keep us distracted. People don't talk about, I try to share with people about the Snake Mound or the Serpent Mound in the Ohio River Valley, and the significance that had, and people are like, what? And then I try to share to them, like, did you know St. Louis is the world's largest earthen pyramid? And they're like, what?
Well, Kev,
and then
let's stick on that for a second, right? Let's stick on that, because I've had Ellie Marzulli on. I've had a few people on talking about this Ohio Serpent Mound. I think Jim Vieira and Hugh Newman, they talked about it as well. This here now, when I had Luna and Donnie on the show, they showed me a diagram of interconnecting circles and spirals and things that, listen, I'm not saying these two things are connected, okay? But I'm saying it has a familiarity. That's what I seen when I look at the two things. Then you find out the Serpent Mound, it's aligned to the solstice. And when it's the summer or the winter, Kevin can explain this in a moment. This is all perfectly aligned. And it's that solstice coming up in December, Kevin, and we can contest the dates of it. But, they're saying it's something called the Great Conjunction. The Great Conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn will occur on the 21st of December, 2020. And it's these signs in the sky that our ancients definitely appear to have paid more attention to than we even know about today. I'm sure in some of the occulted history, the information that's been passed on down through the mystery schools and the Vatican Library and the vault and kind of good stuff that we don't ever get our hands on. I'm sure they know more from the ancient teachings about these significant alignments and movements of stars and planets in the night sky. So, with all that in mind, Kevin, Earth mounds, alignments, solstice, the great conjunction, or I love how Mary put it, hashtag the great mutation of Jupiter and Saturn. What say you to all of this good sky woo, Kev? Because I know you love your sky woo, man.
Well, the
Not
last,
woman, but woo man.
Excuse me, it's
Ma'am?
ma'am.
Yeah, you see, it all gets a bit confusing.
How dare you!
And even Greeting Greta had to have her say as well. Will he be there? No, he won't.
Come on, man.
There
Come
we
on.
go. There we go. Creepy Joe. So then, Kev, what do you say to this whole the Great Mutation?
Well, the last time there was a great harmonic conversion was 2000, May 5th. And I think I have shared with you before, in my experience, I'm afraid of conjunctions because on May 5th of 2000, I found myself crossing the crosswalk on a green light and a garbage truck running me over. So I got a little fear about conjunctions, but just like we enjoy that, you know, these conjunctions were more sense calculated by these indigenous people. So like if you think of a snake and how a snake looks like a cosine or a sine wave, where the arc is at the center point of the full circle of that arc, if you were to put a pole in the ground, the shadow from the moon, full moon, or the shadow of the sun will lie somewhere within that arc. And as those arcs are larger and smaller with different poles, you're going to see in one arc, oh, that's where I make a marker for the shadow. This is where I make a marker for that shadow. And then when they all come into alignment, you look up to the heavens and you say, oh, because the priest of long ago with the kings or the pharaohs, they would stand there on top of their pyramids or on top of their monoliths, and they would yell out to all of their people, and they'd say, I have been chosen by the Almighty God to be your ruler, and to prove this, watch how I blacken out the sun. And they'll raise their hand up to the sun, and they'll lean over to the priest and say, you better be right about this, or we're both going to die. And then all of a sudden there's a hush over the crowd, and all of a sudden the sun slowly starts to be blackened out. Because over the years, the elitist, the priesthood, those that have been in power share the wisdom or the knowledge of time immemorial so that they can use these distractions, this overabundance of stimuli for the narrative. And if you can make that proclamation that you can darken out the sun, and you are right, imagine the control all of a sudden you have over your subjects.
You're bang on, dude. And of course, we can't talk about the Great Conjunction, and I'll get into more of that details in a moment. But also going on in the skies, in the heavens, we just had the lunar eclipse, and now, and which the beaver moon, the lunar eclipse, which of course was a blue moon, because it was the second full moon in a calendar month, and we're approaching in 11 days, 14 hours, 21 minutes and 15 seconds, not that I'm counting, we're going to have a total solar eclipse, Kevin. And that'll be visible in some regions, South America, Chile, Argentina, Southwest Africa, Antarctica. Not that many of us will be down there to see it there, but yeah, not in Glasgow, unfortunately. But we've got all these things, all these cycles, all these conjunctions, all these things happening in the night sky, dude. I mean, I don't know, or sorry, I don't have a good knowledge base when it comes to all of this. But it's got to mean something, right? And the powers that be, they must know the significance, the importance, how they can use this to work their magic, probably with a K. I can only imagine the type of rituals and ceremonies, both good and bad, that'll be taking place when these momentous things happen in the sky. But what do you say to that? Do you think I'm way off the mark or quite close? And what do you make of the solar eclipse?
Well, this is my fear, because my calculation is that we just might find ourselves in the actual solstice on the 14th of this month, which is supposed to be the new moon. And if we know the definition of winter solstice, it means the longest night in the northern hemisphere. So if we have a full length of darkness, and on top of that we have no moon in the sky, it will literally be the darkest, longest night in the northern hemisphere, where you find the majority of the populace of the world in the northern hemisphere, where you will find the elitists that are in their control of the northern hemisphere. And I would guarantee you, in Antarctica, you will find a group of all of these elitists, and I would not be surprised whatsoever if they have an ancient ceremonial site where they're all gathering to see if, just like in Indiana Jones, where they took that crystal on the pole and it shines specifically where more wisdom and more knowledge is, because all of these ancient transcripts, these cuneiform tablets, these papyruses, these hieroglyphs, these rock carvings, all of them point to a relatively same event that is on our horizon, but because we are not 100% sure, and we can only theorize and assume when it's going to be and what it's going to be. But I would be more in the belief that the elitists know what is coming around the horizon, because that's why they go into these gatherings, so they can say, what are we doing in the next 50 years, the next 100 years? Because the Mayan calendar system, one of the most advanced calendar systems in the world, but not if you look at the indigenous people, but at the time, they calculated these eclipses, to the date and to the minute and stuff. And their calendars were a great circle. And within that circle, there was other circles within it, and beyond that circle, there was other circles. And like I was saying with the arc of the snake mound or the serpent mound, once all of those little circles come into alignment, it signifies something. Just like when you set an alarm on your clock, it's to do something. And the same goes for these elitists, where they've realized that ancient peoples set an alarm, and we know these alarms are about to go off, but the greatest challenge is trying to figure out, what is it going to be? What is the outcome of this alignment going to be? Is it going to be positive for all of us, or is it just going to be positive for a few? And that's the excitement.
I tell you, dude, it is exciting. And what do you make of the whole kind of we were talking about the Mayan cycles and things with Malaya on the show, not this week but last week. I think that's just gone up onto YouTube now as well, if people want to catch that. We were talking about the Mayan temples, Malaya's own unique journey, her story. Breathtaking. Honestly, quite astonishing the stuff that Malaya was sharing about her own experience at the Mayan temples. But the
Well,
cycles of the
she's
Mayans as well, right? I mean, I said in opening, or I said earlier on in my pre-show stream, it's almost like deja vu, because we had years of hype talking about the 21st of December, the 21st of December, 21st of December, but it was 2012. And of course, that was us putting our Gregorian calendar interpretation onto something that we barely know what they were talking about. Thanks to most of the stuff getting raped and pillaged and burned, all of that knowledge when the Spanish turned up there. But we won't go down that road today. I'll probably get cancelled for not dealing with that subject appropriately or enough or something. But the Mayan cycles, and when you look at the things going on in the sky this year, the great conjunctions, the total eclipse, the lunar eclipse that came around there the other night. I mean, this feels more like a significant time for these big changes to be occurring, Kevin. And that's definitely my opinion, but what do you think that?
Yeah, I absolutely agree, because these ziggurats, or these pyramids, they weren't built willy-nilly. It wasn't like, hey, there's a flat area, build it there. You know, when you look at like the great pyramids in Egypt, you find out that because of the weight of the pyramid, it could not have been built in a better spot than it was built, because the tectonic plate underneath the pyramid was strong enough to support it. Same with these temples throughout South America and even in Mexico and stuff. And Maya's been very fortunate to have these experiences where you're there on hand, because, you know, she, just like all of us, we are very gifted. We're remarkable people. And I'd like to, you know, humbly correct you where I do believe you are perfect. I am perfect, but only in the sense that there is no other Kevin Baker than you. So how can you not be perfect in that existence? Now, whether or not our words or our actions are perfect, we can definitely debate on those things, because I am a hypocrite. Today, I gave in to that caribou coffee. You know, I gave into it, and I even put my dark chocolate chips into it.
It's
You know,
allowed,
and
dude. It's allowed in 2020. We're all allowed a little creature comfort, man.
well, I do it because I know that within the next 3-4 days, I'm going to be doing a 7-day fast. And so I indulge a little bit before I do these fast, you know, and so we can always find a reason, a justification, an excuse to do why we do the things we do. And I'll be the first person to say that I'm full of excrement, because I prove it once a day how full I am.
Well, same here, dude. I'm full of it. Literally full of it. Hot and steaming stuff. But listen, let me sneak this in here. Let's get to this great conjunction. I done a stream about this. I was just throwing some of the stuff out there before we came live today. But this comes from space.com. And this is what I'm talking about, folks, with everything that's going on in the world right now. Unprecedented times. You know, it's the first time since 1623 that Jupiter and Saturn are going to appear this close in the night sky. And it's going to happen. It's going to happen on the 21st of December, 2020. So it says all through the summer and into the fall, the two gas giants of the solar system, Jupiter and Saturn, have been calling attention to themselves in the southern evening sky. Now, Jupiter, of course, always appears brilliant and is usually one of the brightest nighttime objects. But in recent months, it has stood out even more than usual because of the presence of the bright Saturn trailing just off to its left, which is the east. Now, appearing about 1/12 as bright, Saturn has, in a way, served as Jupiter's lieutenant in the year of 2020. And it says, whenever Jupiter and Saturn are in conjunction, that is, when they have the same right ascension and celestial longitude, it is referred to as a, quote, great conjunction. Primarily because, unlike conjunctions with other bright planets, these two don't get together very often. The average frequency of occurrence is merely the product of their sidereal periods divided by the absolute values of their difference. And if that didn't make any sense to you, don't worry about it. You're in the same club as me. But a sidereal period is defined as the time required for a celestial body within the solar system to complete one revolution with respect to the fixed stars. Saturn's period of 29.65 years multiplied by Jupiter's period of 11.86 years amounts to 351.65. Now, dividing this value by the difference in their sidereal periods gives us 19.76 years. 1976, indeed. Good year, that. So, about every 20 years, Jupiter and Saturn will have a rendezvous, and the next one is coming very soon, scheduled for December the 21st. Most of the time when Jupiter overtakes Saturn, they usually are separated by more than a degree, but come this December 21st, they will be separated by just about 1/10 of a degree, or 6.1 arc minutes. To gauge how close that is, on the next clear night, check out Mizar, the middle star in the handle of the Big Dipper. A fainter star, Alcor, is positioned only 11.8 arc minutes away, and the ability to perceive the perception of these two stars was once considered a test of good vision. Now, it says, and yet Jupiter and Saturn will approach to within about half of that distance. That is just 0.102 degrees. This means under high magnification in your telescope, you'll be able to see both planets. Saturn with its famous ring system, and Jupiter with its cloud bands and Galilean satellites, simultaneously in the same field of view. That's amazing, I must admit. It'll be interesting to watch how the gap between these two planets will gradually close during November and December. And on November the 1st, they were 5.1 degrees apart. And they've been getting closer ever since, folks. Now, get this, because it says here that as to whether the two planets might appear as a single star, I can personally recall on June the 5th, 1978, when Mars and Saturn were separated by a similar distance, and yet I could clearly separate both planets with the naked eye. However, those who are nearsighted might see Jupiter and Saturn appear merely by removing their glasses. Now, when we come back after the break, we're going to find out when this happened the last time. No, I'm going to tell you now. It was 1623, but not only that, it was on July the 16th. Why is that special? Because that's Kev Baker birthday day, that's why. We'll be back after the break. There'll be signs in the sky. Yes, there will. Yes, indeed, that's us back. And if anyone caught me saying in high heels there, no, I have not got very woke during the break.
Excuse me, it's ma'am.
Not quite yet, but if I put my heels on, it might be. I was telling Kevin I'm 5'2" in heels. But yes, we were having a good laugh there during the break, so we were. We're going to get back into the Great Conjunction in a moment. Kevin wasn't too aware of the significance of this, as I wasn't until I started looking into it either. But before we go anywhere, I know there's one person that tonight, we don't like to single anyone out, because I like to think of our whole tribe here, but it's good to give people credit where it's due. And I know this is one character that I wholeheartedly agree with whatever NeSe is about to say, because Algo, he's phoned into the show a few times. You've maybe heard him there. But you must never forget that he himself is his own man with his own channel, and he does some good stuff. You can find him over on YouTube. And Kev, I know you want to give him a shout out, a bit of credit as well. These people, they just come into our life at the right time, dude. We're kind of blessed, right?
Well, I just really wanted to put it out there to the Discord family. I mean, they've been open arms and accepted me, and as I'm trying to figure out the utilization of the bells and whistles of Discord, I got to say thank you to Elgo, who's been algorithm, who's been helping me figure it out, because I proclaimed at the last equinox that by the winter solstice, I was going to be on my YouTube rolling for US and doing more regular shenanigans, or maybe adding some tidbits of wisdom or wisdom. But thank you, Algo, for assisting me in trying to find platforms to where I can make this happen. So, but also, you know, I tip my hat to the disco family, because we're shaking our groove things and having a wonderful time together.
Yeah, big shout out to ZX as well, 'cause I think he set you up a room. One of these, is it text or voice to text rooms? Whatever it is, ZX, he doesn't get thanked for what he does for KBS enough. So ZX, big shout out to you as well.
Thank you for reminding that. Thank you, Zed. He actually set me up a voice chat room, so I don't have to. It's just a challenge being blind.
Yeah, it's a lot easier for you now, right?
Yeah,
you
and
see,
so if I
we're diverse and inclusive over in the Discord.
Right, they accept me for my Native Americanism, for my Britishism, and for the Americanism. I don't know how they are able to do that.
I don't think accept or welcome's the right word. I think
tolerate.
I think it's an endearing kind of quality, because we're all different in there, and wherever people gather right now, as much as I'm a critic of social media, I mean, if that's where you're gathering in a little group of people, it might just be a group chat. But these little bonds, these little conversations, these connections that we're making, they are important. They're important to people that are in them. And I think it is good to take just a slight time out to let people know that they are awesome. Because in the world as crazy as it is, sometimes it's quite easy to forget that. Now, listen, Kev, I want to get right into this, because there's a heck of it kind of weirds me out. I know you like your numbers as well, okay? So we were talking about this great conjunction, and way back in the article, I was going through a rake of numbers, and it was dead confusing and kind of weird. But if I go back to the numbers for just a moment, and we found out that every 19.76 years we get this alignment happening. Now, I said at the time 1976, pretty cool. That's my birthday, or my birth year, sorry. And then if we come down to the end of the article, this is where you find out just how profound this actual alignment we're going to see is, because it says here, as to whether the two planets might appear as a single star, I read that bit before. The last time these two planets appeared so close was back in 1623 on July the 16th. So July the 16th is my birth date. In 1976, and 1976 or 19.76 is how long it takes Saturn and Jupiter to make their alignment. I don't know, dude. It's kind of weird, the numbers. But to finish this little story here, and I'll get your thoughts on all of it, it says we will get another 6 arc minute separation on March 15th, 2080. Maybe a few of our younger readers will be around to catch that one. Well, I don't know about 2080. But what do you make of the Great Conjunction and what we're talking about here? Saturn and Jupiter doing this dance in the night sky, where on the 21st of December 2020, it's going to appear like one of the brightest objects in the night sky as they have this moment of conjunction, when they come together, when they merge.
So I knew of the conjunction, but I did not know to what degree they were going to line up.
0.10 something, real close, dude.
Right. So if you look at all of these celestial bodies, they are all electromagnetic entities in themselves.
Hell yes.
So when you have an alignment of a bunch of different electromagnetic entities, they will cause a electromagnetic attraction or repelling. As we know, in our solar system, we have what is called the asteroid belt. There are times during the cycle when, because of these alignments, the electromagnetic push or pull that occurs can push or pull these asteroids out of their orbit, their ellipsis around the sun. And when this occurs, either that enormity of Jupiter will pull that asteroid to it, or the enormity of the sun will pull that asteroid to the sun. Now, as the Earth spins around in its orbit, if there's this alignment that causes a major disruption of asteroids to be flung out into the solar system, then we are playing dodgeball as we go around that arc. And if we happen to be in that alignment where these asteroids are being pulled to the sun or pulled to Jupiter and causing that disruption, does it not increase the feasibility or the possibility of a cataclysmic event where what do they call it? Nibiru?
Nibiru.
Is it coming back again? Are we finding ourselves on that calendar alignment where these ancient peoples said, hey, look, on that circle right at 43 degrees of the arc, if this alignment happens and that alignment happens, then watch the heavens, because we need to get Space Force up there right away.
Space Force.
Speculation. This is full-on
Oh,
speculation.
dude, we're there, man. We're there. We're on Speculation Island. We are right there, Kev. Can you not feel it? Can you not feel the wind in your face, man? We're there.
Right? But this goes back with the alignment of what has happened in our past. Y2K, could Y2K have just literally been a psyops to where they get the people so worried about an event that then they can find out and let the algorithm take in the data how many people are going to prepare for Y2K when they have events like Katrina? You know, is it a way to find out how people are going to respond not to having water for 3 months, not to be having their medication for 3 months? Can we create a controlled environment by shipping all of these people to the Astrodome in Texas, to where it's all done with military authority, whereas in the stadiums in the area, it was pure chaos? So are the algorithms learning the behavior? So in the event of A happening, then they know that they can come out with plan A1 TAC 2. If A1 TAC 2 doesn't work, then they can go to A1 TAC 3 or A1 TAC 4 sub 5.69, to where these powers that should not be, when they get to their meetings and they're saying, hey, what do we do if this happens? Because we're reaching into the future 100 years to gain and have more control and keep our control. How can we do that?
Kevin,
And
you're
then
on
when
it,
we
man. You're on it. You're on. That's where I am as well.